Now, despite his fellow Texans suffering, freezing, going hungry, some of them even dying, Senator Ted Cruz last night flew to Cancun, Mexico for a family vacation. Pictures of him at the airport and on the plane popped up on social media. CNN has repeatedly reached out to Cruz's office. No word back, but a person familiar with his itinerary confirms the trip. Apparently, he felt he needed to trade the prickly cactus of his recorded podcast for the inviting palm trees of the Yucatan Peninsula in the middle of a crisis, which is, as you just saw, a disaster of historic proportions. And what makes this all the more surprising is that Cruz used police resources in the middle of said crisis to make his way to the Sky Zone. Houston police confirming moments ago that Cruz's staff requested assistance to get him to the airport. The irony is thick, because one of Cruz's re-election selling points in 2018 was that he helped Texans during the Harvey disaster.
When disaster struck, Texans came together, helping each other, everyone doing their part. Like Ted Cruz, who brought home billions in disaster relief and passed emergency tax relief for those hit by Hurricane Harvey.
No official, state or federal, has been more involved in the recovery of Galveston County than Senator Ted Cruz.
When the hurricane hit, you stood up for Texas, and Ted Cruz stood up for you.
I'm Ted Cruz, and I approve this message.
Cruz is not up for re-election now, and he is abandoning his state. It is Bon Voyage MTV spring break style, where in Cancun the temperature is a heavenly 84 degrees. In the city that he flew from, home to the people he serves, it is near freezing. Of course, Cruz has already proven he's not too sentimental when it comes to those who are suffering through disasters in other states. When heat waves caused massive power outages last year in California, Ted Cruz mocked the blue state after the governor called on folks to conserve energy. This is what he said. California is now unable to perform even basic functions of civilization, like having reliable electricity. Democrats want to make California's failed energy policy the standard nationwide. Hope you don't like air conditioning. Now, when called out on his cruelty a couple days ago, Cruz said that he has no defense, and he did the Twitter equivalent of a shrug. Not good, he said, about what was going on in his state. Stay safe, he added, not long before Flying Ted made like Frankie Avalon and bounced back to the beach. I want to talk now with Robert Garrett.
Now, before she goes to this interview, I will play the interview, but as always, Brianna Keilar has done an amazing job here in just calling out the absurdity of conservatives, of the Republicans, and she does it with Democrats from time to time as well. But in this instance, we see an absurd example of the selfishness and the individualism, the complete wanton disregard for the people who elected Ted Cruz into office as he takes this vacation to Cancun. We see that this is a mindset in the Republican Party. And quite frankly, I believe it's a mindset across the entire country. A severe case of individualism to the extent that they have Ted Cruz doesn't care about you. Ted Cruz does not care about the conditions of his own constituents, the very people who voted for him and elected him. I guarantee you that somebody who voted for Ted Cruz is a victim of this storm right now, and he's on vacation. Now, there's a whole lot more to discuss with regards to this. I'm going to continue playing the clip, and I want you to keep watching it. I have several more clips. But in general, I want you to think about what it takes for someone to completely have no regard whatsoever for the human lives that were lost, even when those people are people who voted for you, right? The absurdity and the selfishness that is exemplified by Ted Cruz and America in general in this moment. Take a listen into this interview.
Chief for the Dallas Morning News. We've learned, Robert, CNN has, that Cruz is booked on a flight from Cancun back to Houston this afternoon. I know many constituents of his are without power. They may not even know that, especially with what they're going through, what is up with Ted Cruz. But I wonder what the political fallout is so far.
Well, Brianna, we should note that the Senate is in recess and a U.S. Senator can do nothing about what's hitting us in Texas right now. But this is remarkably bad political timing for Ted Cruz, who, as you know, is a creature.
I actually have to pause it there. Because he's giving Ted Cruz an out. The fact of the matter is regardless of whether or not you could do something, you should be there. right? We can't control all the circumstances of what happens in our life, but what helps us out is the fact that someone is there, not vacationing. And the fact that the Senate is in recess is all the more reason Ted Cruz should have had his Eddie Monster looking booger eating. I mean, he should be there on behalf of his people. So I'll play the rest of the interview, but this is not a valid excuse. The fact that there's nothing he can do. There's nothing any of us can do. There's literally nothing that any of us can do except show compassion and concern. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get that upset about that, but that's the most absurd excuse ever. Let's listen to the rest of what he had to say.
Social media, and it's kind of rich with irony that social media is sort of what has outed him on his furtive dart to the Yucatan Peninsula. And I think we'll be hearing about this for a long time. I think a lot of the Democrats, even more than before, are calling for him to resign.
I mean, in terms of legislating, perhaps not much that he could be doing, but certainly there's a place for him to, comfort Texans and be there, be present while they're going through this, which is something that was clearly such an important part of what he did in Harvey.
I should have known. I should have known Brianna was going to catch that, right? And the only exception is this. In Hurricane Harvey, Ted Cruz was just pretending. It was a photo op for him during Hurricane Harvey. Because if he actually had concern and compassion for human lives, then he would have seen that he needed to cancel his flight, his trip to Mexico right away. That's the truth of the matter. But Brianna was absolutely right. Of course, there's no legislation that could address this issue. But what he could have done was to be present and to show that it's more than politics to him. But that would require for it to actually be more than politics for him. Let's continue.
And it's worth noting that his narrowly vanquished opponent from 2018, Beto O'Rourke, has been very visible, calling seniors and doing things that are sort of a humanitarian nature, even though he's a private citizen, has even less official clout to affect things than Ted Cruz.
And that's the point, right? The point is for us to show compassion. But when you are an empathy-less, when you are a sociopath like conservatives have tried to shape, this country suffers from a severe case of individualism, right? We are trying to, they are trying to enshrine into the mindsets of Americans that we should have no regard whatsoever for the well-being of our neighbor. Even if our neighbor elected us to office and now we can make $180,000 a year doing nothing, not even caring, Ted Cruz, not even caring enough to cancel your vacation when your constituents were dying. Yes, Beto O'Rourke, he was on MSNBC and he had a lot to say about it. Take a listen in.
It tells me that unless we hold those responsible accountable for what they did, and yes, that means Donald Trump, but it also means the junior senator from the state of Texas, who I understand is vacationing in Cancun right now, where when people are literally freezing to death in the state that he was elected to represent and serve. When Ted Cruz helps to incite that sedition, seeks to overturn a lawfully, legitimately, democratically decided election, he is just as culpable for the insurrection, the coup attempt, the deaths.
I'm not sure who that was that was sighing like, sheesh. I want to listen again. I think it was Mika Brzezinski, and it probably was because she agreed with them in most cases. But I want to listen one more time what Beto had to say.
It tells me that unless we hold those responsible accountable for what they did, and yes, that means Donald Trump, but it also means the junior senator from the state of Texas, who I understand is vacationing in Cancun right now, where when people are literally freezing to death in the state that he was elected to represent and serve. When Ted Cruz,
I'm not sure if that was a sigh of frustration or a sigh in agreement, but the fact of the matter is people are dying. And Ted Cruz went on vacation. And it's not just Ted Cruz. It's also people who try to make excuses for Ted Cruz, because one thing about conservatism, while they try to tell people to be responsible, take individual responsibility for their actions. They are literally incapable of holding themselves accountable when they make glaring, disgusting, I don't want to call it mistakes. I don't have a better word for it right now. But when they do something as egregious as Ted Cruz did, Republicans and conservatives are completely incapable of holding themselves accountable. Take a listen to this gentleman with a finely painted on beard making an excuse for Ted Cruz's absence.
We did reach out to Senator Cruz's office for confirmation here on what this was all about. But TW, when you look at this, you know, we're going to criticize Gavin Newsom for going to the French Laundry. We're going to criticize the mayor of Austin, Texas, for going down to Cabo San Lucas in the middle of a pandemic. You know, and again, Ted Cruz is not exactly apples to apples here, but
yes,
he could be out there, you know, helping out his constituents, right?
Well, honestly, John, I'm not so concerned about where Ted Cruz is traveling to. I mean, in this day and time, we can communicate, we can get things done remotely. And perhaps if things are as bad in Texas as I've heard, he may have a better opportunity to do it remotely. But the reality is this. There are people hurting in Texas right now.
Right. They're hurting while the man that you're trying to defend with your painted on beard is on vacation. See, there's a level of selfishness that is at the core of America in general, right? Individualism. The inability to have compassion for your neighbor is enshrined into the thinking of this country. And we see it as a virtue instead of a vice, when in reality it's that selfishness, that greed and individualism that is literally going to destroy us. Here is an elected official, an elected Republican, telling you exactly what he thinks about the idea of helping your neighbor. This is what he said. Tim Boyd, I believe he's resigned since then. He said, "Let me hurt some feelings while I have a minute. No one owes you or, well, he can't even spell, or your family anything, nor is it the local government's responsibility to support you during times like this. Sink or swim, it's your choice. The city and county, along with power providers and any other services, owes you nothing. I'm sick and tired of people looking for a damn handout. Seriously? If you don't have electricity, you step up and come up with a game plan to keep your family warm and safe. If you have no water and you deal without it and think outside of the box and survive and supply water to you and your family. If you're sitting at home in the cold because you have no power and are sitting there without waiting for someone to come rescue you because he can't even freaking spell. You're lazy with an apostrophe R-E, you moron. Lazy is direct result of your raising. Only the strong will survive and the weak will perish. Yeah. These people are complete and total sociopaths. They look at selfishness as a virtue. They look at individualism as a virtue. They look at the fact that they are beneficiaries of the system, and then they break the system so that it cannot serve you. And then they say, oh, you're being lazy. No, what you're being is a mediocre white conservative who has no regard for anyone else's life because you're individualistic scum focused on your own self-aggrandizement at the expense of humanity. You are an enemy of humanity, and nobody like this deserves to be in power ever. You got to vote these people out. And if we can't vote these people out, well, then we need to take to the streets and force them out, because humanity will not survive the greed and the selfishness, the individualism and downright evilness that we're seeing not only in Ted Cruz, but across the conservative spectrum.